The dining room looked perfect, china polished, silverware lined with military precision, wine glasses catching the chandelier's glow, but under that flawless surface was a trap. Every smile at the table hid sharpened teeth. Every toast carried a secret. They believed I would play my part quietly, nodding, signing, disappearing. What they didn't expect was that the very document they forced into my hands would one day expose them all. Like a thread pulled from a sweater, everything they built unraveled in front of the world. Stay with me, and I'll show you how betrayal disguised as family loyalty collapsed into public ruin. And before we go further, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I want to hear your take on what you think happens next. I am Elliot Carter, 36 years old, software engineer, painfully introverted, the type who wears the same 2 cardigans on rotation and avoids phone calls like they're the plague. I live alone in a modest apartment in Portland, Oregon, and I like it that way. I hadn't seen my family in nearly 2 years. Not because of any dramatic falling out, but because silence tends to form between us like dust on an unused shelf. My younger brother Zach is a lawyer, cocky in a button-down shirt, always with a smirk that says he knows something you don't. My sister Haley is a full-time influencer with surgically perfect teeth and a voice that always sounds like she's one TikTok away from losing her mind. And my parents? Douglas and Lorraine Carter are charming in public, ice cold behind closed doors. I was always the quiet one, the oddball who never quite fit their family mold of ambition, money, and appearances. So when my mother called out of the blue and invited me to a special family weekend, I felt a pit form in my stomach. I asked what the occasion was, and her voice softened. Manipulatively, I realized in hindsight. It's about Grandpa Henry. We're setting up something in his memory. A veteran's retirement home. Something honorable. You were so close to him, Elliot. We need you here. That part? That part hooked me. Grandpa Henry was the only person in our family who ever made me feel seen. He taught me how to fix engines and showed me how to play chess. When I was 11 and scared out of my mind at my first science fair, he came and clapped louder than anyone when I explained my basic robotics demo. He was a former Marine, strict but fair, and believed in pulling your own weight without stepping on others. When he passed 2 years ago, I didn't cry at the funeral. I was too numb. So the thought of honoring him through something meaningful brought a sliver of warmth to my otherwise cold relationship with the Carter clan. I agreed to fly down. When I landed in Austin, I was picked up in Zach's new Tesla. He didn't even ask how I'd been, just said, "You still using that flip phone?" and laughed like he was still the quarterback and I was still the nerd. The Carter house hadn't changed. Manicured lawn, brick and stone facade, and inside, the air always smelled like lavender and something artificial. My mother hugged me like she hadn't spent years ignoring my emails. "You look so grown up," she said with surprise, as if I hadn't been an adult for over a decade. My father gave me a firm handshake, like I was a business associate. Haley came bounding down the stairs mid-Instagram story, flashing a peace sign and saying, "Elliot, look who decided to stop coding and start caring." I smiled, tightly. That night, they set up a formal dinner, not our usual takeout and half-hearted conversation. We sat at the long mahogany table with real candles and Haley's ring light set up in the corner. My mother explained, with dramatic pauses, that Grandpa Henry's legacy deserved more than just memories. "We're starting a nonprofit in his name," she said, "a luxury care facility for veterans. We want to be top tier, something he would have been proud of." My father added, "Zach's done all the legal groundwork, but we want it to be a family effort. And we thought, since you're in tech and all, maybe you could be the face of the digital wing." I blinked. "Me? What?" Zach handed me an iPad across the table. "We just need your e-signature here. It's for public documentation, symbolic, really. Shows unity, Transparency. And it'll help get our 501c3 pushed through. I looked at the screen. There was a document already loaded up, pre-scrolled to the signature page. Legal language blurred in front of me. Should I read this first? I asked. My mother smiled like I was being adorably paranoid. Elliot, honey, Zach's a lawyer. He's read everything. It's just legalese for the board. Haley chirped in. Just sign so we can toast and post. I already drafted the caption. One family. One mission. One legacy. I wanted to object. Something fell off. But then again, this was about Grandpa. I didn't want to be difficult. Maybe this was their awkward way of trying to include me. So I picked up the stylus and signed my name on the dotted line. Zach tapped the screen, said submitted, and raised his glass. To the Carter Foundation, he toasted. Everyone clinked glasses except me. I felt like I just handed over more than I understood. And to hear your take on what you think happens next. This is Alicia from Newbridge Federal Credit Union. We're calling to confirm the transfer of property rights to your associate, Mr. Zach Carter, initiated last night. We just need verbal authorization to finalize the title adjustment. I blinked, slowly setting down my mug. I'm sorry, what transfer? The woman paused. It's the transfer of 514 Chestnut Hill Road, formerly listed under the Henry Carter Trust, to the Carter Legal Group under Zachary Carter's name. The documents were signed with your approval. We just need verbal confirmation. I stood up so fast the chair screeched across the tile. That was Grandpa's house, his actual home, not just the memory care idea or nonprofit dream, but the house he'd lived in for 40 years, the one he swore he'd never let be sold to a bank or split for profit. I didn't approve any transfer, I said, heart pounding. Are you sure my signature was on that? Alicia sounded uncomfortable. Yes, Mr. Carter, we have a signed authorization submitted digitally from your verified ID. It matched your prior documents exactly. We also have biometric signature verification confirming it's authentic. I ended the call with some vague excuse, then stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, replaying that moment at the dining table. The iPad, the signature, the document I didn't read, the speed with which Zach submitted it. I'd been tricked. They hadn't needed my opinion or support for some memorial. They had needed access. They'd used my name and my relationship with Grandpa as bait. I grabbed my laptop and opened my email, scanning for anything Zach might have sent. Nothing. No documents, no copies, no follow-ups. I checked my spam folder. Still nothing. My palms were sweating now. I tried to call Zach, but it went straight to voicemail. Haley didn't pick up either. I called my parents' house. My father answered, and I launched straight in. Dad, what exactly did I sign in Austin? There was a long pause before he responded. Voice clipped. Elliot, calm down. Everything's been handled. Zach told us you were aware. No, I said, try not to shout. I wasn't. That property transfer, it wasn't symbolic. That was real. That was Grandpa's house. It's just a matter of paperwork, he replied. And that property was underutilized anyway. The foundation needs assets. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father sounded like he was discussing a lawnmower, not the home where his own father lived and died. You lied to me, I said quietly. All of you. He didn't deny it. Just said, Zach will explain it when he has time. You always overreact. Then he hung up. My hands were trembling as I stared at the screen, 100 possibilities slamming into me all at once. How had they forged this so perfectly? Was the document altered before I signed it? Was it digitally rigged? I opened the encrypted PDF reader I used at work and searched through my cloud backups. I'm obsessive about my devices. Every interaction I have online is automatically logged to a secure archive. If that iPad session was legit, I should have had a mirror of the data, screenshots, file hashes, something. But when I checked the logs, the file didn't exist. Not even in the temporary cache. That wasn't just suspicious. That was impossible. I called a former colleague who works in digital forensics. I gave her the details without names, told her what happened. She listened patiently, then said, "It sounds like they used AI-driven deep fake tech on the dock. There's software now that can mimic your signature and overlay it in real time. If they had access to your old e-sign records, it's not hard." My chest tightened. Zach had worked as a legal consultant for a firm specializing in digital asset law. He knew exactly how to manipulate metadata, contracts, signatures. I asked my friend what to do next, and she said, "Get legal help and gather every shred of evidence. Don't confront them yet. They've already played dirty." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the gleam in Zach's eyes as he slid the iPad across the table. How quickly he hit submit. Haley had an army of followers ready to defend her curated image, and my parents had the old money charm to make anyone believe they were just trying to do the right thing. I wasn't just outnumbered, I was outgunned. But if there was one thing I knew how to do, it was how to dig. I started by revisiting the archive video of that dinner, this time watching everything, not just the moment I signed. Haley's camera had captured more than she realized. Zach whispering something to Dad right after I signed, Dad nodding with a faint smirk, Mom pouring another glass of wine with a look that was far too pleased for what should have been a family celebration. Frame by frame, I watched their faces. I noted timestamps. Then I opened a private cloud folder I hadn't touched since college, the one where I used to log suspicious behavior from classmates during our group projects. I've always been meticulous, borderline obsessive, and for once, that compulsion was about to pay off. I created a new secure folder titled Operation Ashfall, named after a code Grandpa once told me when I was 12, the name of an old military drill about exposing internal betrayal. I started logging everything: phone records, emails, social media timestamps, cache files, and screen recordings. My next step was to reach out to someone who knew Zach but didn't owe him loyalty. That person was Marcus Delano, a former associate from his first job out of law school. We'd only met once at a Christmas party years ago, but I remembered Marcus had pulled me aside and whispered, "Keep your eye on that one. Zach doesn't play fair even with family." I found Marcus on LinkedIn, sent a carefully worded message requesting a confidential conversation about something Zach may have done. To my surprise, he replied within 20 minutes and agreed to speak over an encrypted call. When we connected, Marcus didn't even let me finish explaining. "Let me guess," he said, "Zach forged something, didn't he?" I sat in stunned silence. Marcus sighed. He pulled something similar at the old firm. Signed a merger deal using his supervisor's proxy account. Covered his tracks, but HR knew. That's why he left. I felt the air go still around me. "Did you report him?" I asked. "Off the record, yes. On paper, they called it a strategic restructure. But I can tell you this. He's smart, but not perfect. His arrogance makes him sloppy when he thinks no one's watching." That was exactly what I needed to hear. I thanked Marcus, then moved on to the next step, infiltrating Zach's digital world without him realizing it. I had once built a network crawler for a cybersecurity firm, a side project that never saw the light of day because it walked the ethical line too closely. I resurrected that code and modified it for one target: the Carter Legal Group's internal systems. It was risky, but I wasn't doing it for money or revenge. I needed the truth. I deployed the crawler from a secure server overseas, masking my IP and routing the signal through 3 virtual machines. The code sniffed for metadata inconsistencies, document edits, email attachments, anything Zach might have created or altered involving my name or Grandpa's trust. Within hours, it flagged 2 documents. One was a draft of the property transfer titled Elliot_signature_V3_final.pdf, created 3 days before I even arrived in Austin. The second was an email from Zach to someone labeled only as Client X, saying, "Once Elliot signs, We can process the transfer and shift title to CG Holdings under the Delaware LLC shell. He won't question it. That line hit me like a punch to the ribs. Not only had Zach orchestrated everything before I arrived, but he had also planned to bury the asset behind a corporate firewall. Grandpa's house wasn't going to be turned into a memorial. It was going to be flipped, gutted, and sold under a new identity, washed clean of any family history. I copied every file and encrypted them in a private drive. I then created a dead man's switch, an automatic email that would send all the evidence to a list of trusted contacts if anything happened to me or if I failed to check in every 48 hours. I was dealing with people who smiled to your face while quietly gutting you from the inside out. I couldn't afford to be naive anymore. My final step that day was more personal. I returned to the old voicemail messages Grandpa had left me over the years. I had them stored in a folder labeled Henry, and one in particular stood out. It was from about a month before he passed. His voice was tired but sharp. What came next was far more personal, targeted not at my assets, but at my credibility, my character, and my emotional stability. It began the morning after I recovered the incriminating files. I received a call from my manager at work, someone I respected and had worked with for 5 years. His voice was tight, cautious. "Elliot, I need to ask, are you okay?" I was caught off guard. "Yeah, why?" He hesitated. "There's been a situation. Someone sent an anonymous tip to HR about you being involved in a financial fraud case with your family. They included screenshots, documents, emails. We don't think it's real, but our compliance team has to follow protocol. You're on temporary leave, effective immediately." My blood ran cold. I opened my work email and saw the suspension notice, bland and clinical. There was no detail, just the implication. Someone was working hard to destroy my reputation before I could speak out. I knew immediately who was behind it. Zach was cutting off every avenue of stability I had. I checked my credit cards next. 2 were already frozen. Then my checking account. Locked. I called the bank, only to be told that a fraud alert had been placed on my identity. Someone had reported suspicious behavior under my name. I hadn't just been betrayed. I was being erased. Still reeling, I got a text from Haley. It was a video clip, no context, just a phrase, "You've gone too far." I opened it. The footage was grainy and clearly taken through a cracked door. It showed me at the hospital in Austin, standing near my mother's hospital bed. She was sobbing. I appeared to be shouting. The caption on the video read, "Tech bro screams at dying mother over money." I remembered that moment clearly. My mother had staged a fainting episode the morning after I confronted Dad about the property transfer. They rushed her to the hospital, claiming stress and heart palpitations. I had visited her alone, demanded the truth, asked her why she went along with Zach's plan. She'd turned the waterworks on instantly, accusing me of not caring, of trying to ruin the family. Someone, Haley, no doubt, had recorded that exchange, then edited it into a 1-minute smear piece. The post had already been shared over 18,000 times. The comment section was filled with venom. Classic narcissist. Spoiled brat attacking his own mother. Some people don't deserve families. My inbox was flooded with messages from strangers calling me a disgrace. On top of that, my professional blog had been hacked. Someone posted a fake article claiming I had been fired from multiple jobs for ethics violations. The digital footprint of my identity was crumbling faster than I could react. I called Haley, finally, and demanded she take the video down. She answered cheerfully, like nothing was wrong. Nothing was wrong. "Why are you so upset?" she said in that syrupy influencer tone. "It's not even that bad. You do yell a lot. People are just expressing their opinions. You recorded me without my consent and posted a lie." I snapped. She giggled. "Everyone curates their narrative, Elliot. I'm just better at it than you." Maybe if you stopped being a victim and joined the family plan, this wouldn't be so hard. She hung up before I could answer. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just complicit, she was thriving off of this. Her brand had exploded with the drama. She was selling merchandise with slogans like family over fortune and real love isn't bought. My suffering was her monetization strategy. I drove to the local police department, hoping to file a complaint, maybe even start a case on digital defamation or identity theft. But the officer I spoke to glanced at the viral video and raised an eyebrow. Sir, do you have any proof this was edited? Do you have the original full-length video? No, I admitted. But he cut me off. Then we can't confirm manipulation. I'm sorry. These things get messy in families. Maybe speak to a civil attorney. The door was closing on every front. That night, I sat alone in my dark apartment, surrounded by silence and glowing screens. Every device a window into a world now turning against me. I replayed the voicemail from Grandpa again, just to hear his voice. My email inbox was flooded with messages from strangers, former classmates, distant relatives, all of them asking versions of the same question. Did you really scream your dying mother for money? The most painful part wasn't even the accusations. It was realizing how easily people were willing to believe the worst about me based on a single clip and no context. It was like years of being a good son, a loyal employee, a quiet contributor didn't matter. One narrative, especially one crafted by my media-savvy sister and backed by Zach's legal polish, was all it took to turn the tide. I thought about deleting all my accounts, changing my name, disappearing entirely. But every time I replayed Grandpa's voicemail or looked at the evidence I had compiled, something in me refused to retreat. Still, holding on to righteousness doesn't make you invincible. One morning, I woke up to find the lock on my apartment door scratched and damaged, like someone had tried to force it. Nothing was missing inside, but drawers had been pulled open. My laptop was in the same spot on my desk, but it had been unplugged and slightly moved. My heart dropped. I checked my backup drives. The files were still there. Operation Ashfall was intact. But it was clear someone had tried to scare me, maybe even steal the data. The message was loud and clear. I wasn't safe, not even at home. That same day, my landlord slipped a notice under my door, citing multiple complaints from neighbors about suspicious behavior, increased traffic, and noise. He said I had until the end of the month to vacate. I tried to plead my case, but his eyes were already closed to anything I had to say. He didn't want drama in his building, and thanks to the media firestorm Zach and Haley had engineered, I was now the definition of drama. With my job on hold, my accounts locked, and my lease terminated, I packed what I could into 3 suitcases and drove out of Portland that night with no destination. The entire time, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see a car tailing me. I ended up at a cheap motel 3 towns over, the kind with flickering neon lights and a vending machine that only took exact change. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me time and space to think. From there, I spent my days in public libraries and co-working cafes under a burner laptop, logging into encrypted servers, reviewing every frame of footage, every document, every email thread I'd managed to copy from Zach's law firm. I wasn't just looking for dirt. I needed proof beyond reasonable doubt, something that would hold up if this went to court or public arbitration. That's when I stumbled on something unexpected. In the metadata of one PDF file, I saw a tag that didn't match the others. It was signed by someone named C. Waverly. The document was a draft of the very same property transfer agreement Zach had used to trick me, but this version included several red lines. Notes questioning the legality of pushing a full transfer through using only symbolic family signatures. I traced the name and discovered that C. Waverly was a junior associate who had worked briefly at Zach's firm. Her LinkedIn page showed she had since moved to a different city and was no longer practicing law. I reached out using a fake client inquiry through her new firm's general contact form. To my surprise, she replied within a day and agreed to a private video call. When we finally spoke, I could see the tension in her face even before I said a word. "I know why you're calling," she said. "I had a feeling this would come back." I asked her what she meant, and she admitted that she had been the one who initially flagged Zach's plan as unethical. He told me it was a family restructure for a nonprofit. When I dug into the ownership shifts and saw your grandfather's estate being rerouted into a Delaware shell corporation, I warned him. I put my concerns in writing. 2 days later, I was taken off the project. A week after that, I was encouraged to resign. My throat tightened. "Would you be willing to sign an affidavit? Or at least send me those internal memos?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I kept backups. I don't want to be involved publicly, but I'll send you what I have. Just be careful. Your brother has money, connections, and no shame." She ended the call before I could thank her. That night, I received an encrypted folder containing everything: emails, draft edits, timestamped notes. It was the missing puzzle piece. It showed intent, deception, and that Zach had ignored legal advice to carry out the fraud. I stored the files in 3 separate places, then went for a walk to clear my head. I was halfway down the block when a black SUV slowed beside me. For a split second, I thought it might be coincidence. But then the passenger window rolled down, and I heard a familiar voice. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" It was Zach. He wasn't smiling this time. His voice was low, dangerous. This isn't some movie where the nerd wins. But the moment he looked me in the eye and called me the nerd, I understood exactly how he still saw me. Weak, passive, predictable. That was going to be his downfall. I decided right then that if I was going to fight back, it wouldn't be with another confrontation or press release or family dinner meltdown. I needed to strike where he didn't expect it, with silence and precision. So I went quiet. I checked into a cheap extended stay under a fake name and rerouted all my digital activity through a private server. No more burner emails or encrypted chats. Everything I did now happened through a new layer of identity. I set up 2-factor access to every account, migrated all my files into decentralized cloud storage, and built a full virtual sandbox on a device that couldn't be tracked to me. Then I reached out to the one person in this whole mess who might have more power than Zach. Grandpa's original estate lawyer, Charles Peterson. I remembered Peterson from when I was a teenager. He was a kind but sharp-eyed man who never spoke in casual language. At the time, I thought he was just another one of Grandpa's old-school military friends. But later I learned he was a retired litigator who specialized in trust law. After Grandpa died, Peterson seemed to vanish from the picture, and no one mentioned him again. That alone felt suspicious. Through a mix of digital footprint tracking and good old-fashioned phone calls, I finally found his contact information, an unlisted number registered to a modest ranch property in northern Colorado. I called, not expecting much. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Peterson," he said, voice gruff and slow. I introduced myself, reminded him of who I was. At first, he was cautious, clearly trying to remember. But when I mentioned the Henry Carter Trust and told him I had reason to believe the will had been tampered with, there was a long silence on the other end. "Meet me in person," he said. "No phone calls. Bring everything you've got. If what you're saying is true, we're going to blow this wide open." I drove through the night, my hard drives in a locked bag next to me. Peterson's property was nothing like I expected. A quiet, unassuming house surrounded by forest, no signs of wealth or vanity. When I arrived, he was already waiting on the porch, dressed in flannel and worn jeans, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He ushered me inside, asked no small talk, and went straight to business. I showed him the documents, the metadata, the emails from a junior lawyer, the video clips, and most importantly, the property transfer Zach had faked. He studied everything with surgical focus, flipping through files with eyes that missed nothing. They used you, he said eventually. They weaponized your trust and your lack of legal background to make it look like consent. But this, he pointed at the emails and signature overlays, this isn't just unethical. It's criminal. I asked him about the will. Your grandfather had a final will, he confirmed. I drafted it myself. But a week before he passed, he called me to update it. He said he didn't trust your parents or your siblings to respect his wishes. Said only you had earned it. We created an amendment, sealed, notarized, but it was never filed with the court. Why? I asked, heart pounding. Because the morning I was supposed to file it, I got a call from someone at the firm handling his estate. They said the family had already submitted a version. I demanded to see it. They stonewalled me. Then my license was randomly audited, and I got hit with a malpractice claim from nowhere. I backed off to protect myself. He paused, then said, but I kept a copy. I knew this day would come. He disappeared into another room and returned with a locked file case. Inside was the original signed, sealed, and time-stamped amendment to Grandpa's will. It left full control of the estate to me. Not just the house, but the investments, the land, the trusts, everything. The conditions were clear. I had to live 5 years without touching the estate to prove I wasn't after the money. That's why no one told me. That's why they rushed to dismantle the assets and bury the records. They had gambled that I would never find the truth, and if I did, I'd be too far gone to do anything about it. But they had underestimated me again. Peterson made certified copies and instructed me to file an emergency claim at the probate court immediately. But don't announce it yet, he said. Let them keep thinking you're falling apart. When we strike with everything. We submitted the petition, along with notarized copies of the hidden amendment and a formal request for an injunction against any further property transfers related to the Henry Carter Trust. Once the documents were logged and assigned to a judge, I turned to Peterson and said, now we wait. But we weren't really waiting. We were executing. Peterson's paralegal, a quiet woman named Lisa, who had worked with him for over 15 years, handled the court communications while I prepared for Phase 2, media exposure. I reached out to the journalist I had spoken with before, Amanda Lee, and gave her access to the full digital dossier. We met in a coffee shop an hour outside Denver, where I handed over the hard drives and walked her through everything. How Zach had manipulated the signature, how Haley weaponized social media, how my parents silently condoned the deception, and how they had systematically tried to erase my credibility through identity attacks and false narratives. Amanda listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes or asking for timestamps. By the time we finished, her face had hardened with disbelief and purpose. This isn't just a family squabble, she said. This is a full-blown white-collar crime. They didn't just lie. They coordinated. This has federal implications. That's the idea, I said. But I don't want this story rushed. I want it done right. You get one shot to break a family like this. If we go too early, they'll spin it again. She nodded, agreeing to hold off until we received confirmation from the court that the injunction had gone through. That came 2 days later. A single email from the probate judge's office confirming a freeze order had been issued and that a hearing was scheduled to review the validity of the original will amendment. Just like that, the clock started ticking. I knew the Carters would find out within hours. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of the court docket with a single message beneath. You're making a mistake. I replied, I'm making history. That night, I checked into a hotel near the courthouse using my real name for the first time in weeks. I wanted them to know I wasn't hiding anymore. At dawn, Amanda published the article. It was titled, The Quiet Betrayal, how a family tried to erase one man from his grandfather's legacy. It laid out the timeline, included screenshots, quotes from legal experts, metadata analysis, and even a section from the junior associate who had tried to stop the fraud early on. The article exploded within hours. News outlets picked it up nationwide. Hashtags trended. Public opinion flipped like a coin in the wind. The same strangers who had once sent me threats now sent apologies, claiming they always knew something fell off. The video Haley had posted was dissected by analysts and shown to have been edited deceptively. Suddenly, she wasn't a brave daughter defending her mother. She was a content creator profiting from a fabricated narrative. Sponsors dropped her within the day. Her apology livestream was painful to watch, mostly because it wasn't an apology at all. It was damage control. "I was misled," she cried. "I didn't know the full story. I was protecting my family." But no one believed her anymore. Her brand was fractured beyond repair. Meanwhile, Zach tried to fight back in legalese, filing a counterclaim to assert that the original amendment was invalid due to procedural delays. But the moment he did that, he opened the door to discovery, and with it, the release of all his internal emails and hidden corporate shell documentation. Amanda published follow-ups, naming each LLC Zach had used to hide estate transfers, each transaction routed through offshore accounts. The IRS launched an investigation. So did the State Bar. My parents remained eerily silent through it all, retreating from public view like a stage curtain being drawn on a collapsing act. I knew they were scrambling, consulting attorneys, probably blaming each other. But it was too late. Every move they made now looked like guilt. Every word they said sounded like spin. I was asked to appear on a morning news segment, and for once, I said yes. Dressed in a plain blue shirt and blazer, I sat under the studio lights and told my story, calmly and clearly, without exaggeration. I didn't cry, I didn't beg for sympathy, I just laid out the facts. This was never about money, I said into the camera. It was about respect. My grandfather trusted me, and I was the only one who didn't betray that trust. The people who tried to erase me underestimated how much I was willing to endure to honor him. That line echoed for days. Some people were there out of morbid curiosity, others out of genuine support, but all of them were about to witness the conclusion of a war that had been waged quietly behind closed doors until now. On one side of the room sat Zach, Haley, and my parents, all dressed in crisp, coordinated black, as if mourning their dignity. Their legal team flanked them, stone-faced and overpriced. On my side sat only Peterson, calm as ever, with his weathered briefcase containing the one document that could unravel everything they had tried to build on lies. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Olivia Barrett, entered with quiet authority and opened the proceedings without delay. "We are here today to determine the rightful executor and distribution terms of the Henry Carter Trust in light of new documentation and contested amendments submitted by Elliott Carter." Her voice was firm, not unkind, but it left no room for theatrics. The first hour was standard. Zach's lawyer presented their side, claiming the submitted will and subsequent transfers had all been above board, legally signed, and appropriately filed. They pointed to my original digital signature on the transfer documents, the same one I now knew had been fraudulently obtained. I said nothing during their argument. I let the lies pile up like a fragile tower. When it was our turn, Peterson stood and presented the original sealed amendment, the one Grandpa had signed in front of a notary and 2 witnesses, the one leaving control of the estate in full to me. He also submitted affidavits from the witnesses, a signed timeline, and most crucially, his own statement describing how he had been prevented from filing it due to interference and intimidation. Judge Barrett asked him 2 questions. "Are you absolutely certain this document reflects Mr. Henry Carter's final wishes?" And were you threatened or coerced in his silence after his passing? To both, Peterson replied, "Yes, Your Honor," and submitted supporting documentation from the junior associate, financial analysts, and time-stamped digital evidence proving the existence of the amendment prior to the fraudulent filing. I expected some resistance from Zach's team, but nothing prepared me for what came next. Zach stood up, not his lawyer, Zach himself. "Your Honor," he said with that same smug confidence he had used all his life, "this entire narrative is a fabrication. My brother has always been emotionally unstable. He isolated himself from the family, refused to participate in any memorial decisions, and only showed up once money was involved. He has a history of antisocial behavior, and frankly, I believe this sudden reappearance is an opportunistic grab at an estate he never contributed to maintaining." The gallery murmured, and even Haley looked slightly uncomfortable. I could feel my pulse rising, but I kept my mouth shut. Zach wasn't talking to the judge. He was performing for the court of public opinion. His words were bait. I didn't bite. Instead, Peterson calmly approached the bench again and said, "Your Honor, if I may, we have one final piece of evidence. A recorded video message made by Mr. Henry Carter precisely 1 week before his passing, in which he outlines his final intentions and confirms the contents of the amendment." That silenced the room. The judge nodded. "Play the recording." The court officer rolled in a monitor and pressed play. There he was, Grandpa, seated in his favorite chair, wearing his military service jacket, voice steady despite the wear of age. If you're watching this, then something went wrong. I wanted my will filed cleanly, but I had a feeling certain people in my family wouldn't honor that. So I'm stating it here, clearly on record. My estate goes to Elliot Carter. He's the only one who ever listened, ever showed up without expecting something. The rest of you, if you're shocked, maybe it's because you stopped being family a long time ago. This house, the trust, the land, all of it is his to manage as he sees fit. The video ended, and the room remained frozen. No one said a word. Judge Barrett turned slowly toward Zach, whose face had gone pale. "Mr. Carter, do you have any response to this direct testimony from the decedent?" For the first time in my life, I saw Zach speechless. He stammered something about the video being potentially manipulated, but it was weak, hollow. Haley didn't speak at all. My mother kept her eyes on the floor. My father's jaw clenched, but even he didn't offer a rebuttal. The judge looked over the bench. Given the authenticity of the documents, the supporting affidavits, and the direct statement of the deceased, I hereby validate the amended will as the final and controlling testament of Henry Carter. Effective immediately, Elliot Carter is recognized as the sole executor and beneficiary of the Henry Carter Trust. All prior transfers are to be investigated and, if found fraudulent, reversed. This court is adjourned. They weren't interested in gossip anymore. They were hunting a scandal, and Zach, Haley, and my parents had given them everything they needed. Zach was the first to feel the weight of consequences. His law license was suspended pending the results of the ongoing bar investigation, but the damage to his reputation was already permanent. Emails released in discovery showed he had not only altered digital signatures, but coached staff to delete metadata logs and reroute communications through offshore servers to avoid detection. Screenshots from whistleblowers at his firm showed Slack messages in which Zach bragged about securing the trust before the idiot brother catches on. When those messages leaked, the firm issued a public statement condemning his actions and fired him on the spot. He lost all existing clients, and several of them launched separate lawsuits claiming breach of trust and fiduciary fraud. I heard from Peterson a few days later that the DA's office was considering formal criminal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, Haley's influencer career didn't just stall, it plummeted. Brands that once showered her with partnerships began releasing public dissociation statements, apologizing for supporting someone involved in a legal and moral scandal. A viral clip emerged from a live stream she did shortly after the court ruling, in which she tried to cry, but instead slipped and said, "I just didn't think Elliot had it in him to fight back." That clip was everywhere. People mocked it. Memes spread like wildfire. She became a punchline in the very online world that once worshipped her. And by the end of the month, she had deactivated every major platform. The sponsors vanished, the ad revenue dried up, and the curated life of soft lighting and family hashtags collapsed under the weight of truth. My parents were quieter about their shame, but their consequences came in a slower, more corrosive form. My father resigned from his board positions at two local banks after clients raised concerns about the integrity of someone involved in documented estate fraud. My mother, who had once been the head of several charitable committees, was asked to step down from her roles. The polite excuses came through email, but the message was clear. They were social poison now. Their circle, once filled with wine tastings and country club galas, began to shrink. People who had pretended not to take sides started keeping their distance, answering texts with polite or busy messages that never led to follow-ups. They became pariahs in their own town. The financial fallout was even worse. Since Zach had routed the trust's assets through various shell corporations to hide their paper trail, and since those transfers were deemed fraudulent, the court ordered asset recovery. All holdings connected to the trust were frozen. The properties they thought they owned were suddenly in limbo, and the accounts they relied on to maintain their lifestyles were drained back into the trust under my control. Zach's luxury apartment, purchased with trust-backed collateral, was repossessed. Haley's car lease was revoked. My parents' second vacation home, the one they claimed was for retreats and charity meetings, was sold at auction to cover legal fees. I didn't have to lift a finger. The system they had tried to game was now chewing them up from the inside. But I didn't revel in it the way I thought I would. Yes, there was a part of me that felt vindicated every time I saw a headline exposing another lie or another asset returned. But mostly, I felt an overwhelming sense of grief, not for what I lost, but for what they were willing to destroy to get what they wanted. I visited Grandpa's house alone one morning, the sun just barely rising behind the tall oaks that lined the driveway. The key still fit the lock. Inside, everything was just as I remembered. His old reading chair, the photos on the wall, the quiet warmth of a home built on discipline and love. I sat there for hours, thinking about how it all could have gone differently if they'd just asked, if they just believed that honoring his wishes meant more than hoarding his wealth. A week later, I received a letter from the State Bar. They wanted my formal statement in the Zach Carter case. I provided it without hesitation, detailing everything he'd done, how he'd lied, manipulated, and used his legal knowledge to deceive not just me, but the entire system. That same day, Amanda published a final article titled From Betrayal to Justice: How One Man Brought Down a Dynasty of Deceit. It wasn't about me being a hero. It was about accountability, about what happens when people finally stop letting the powerful rewrite the truth. Donations began pouring into the veteran housing fund I had started in Grandpa's name. And within months, we had broken ground on the facility he always dreamed of. I named it the Henry Carter Center for Dignity and Care. The weeks that followed the fallout were unlike anything I had ever experienced. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up in panic or paranoia. The endless barrage of threats, the media attacks, the legal battles, all of it had quieted into something resembling peace. But peace didn't come from watching my family crumble. It came from standing in the middle of the construction site of the Henry Carter Center, watching as beams of steel rose into the sky, forming the skeleton of something real, something enduring. I had decided early on that if I was going to inherit Grandpa's estate, I wasn't going to hoard it, hide it, or use it to prop up my ego the way Zach or Haley would have. No, I would put it exactly where Grandpa intended, into the hands of people who needed it most. The center wasn't just a veteran's home. It was designed as a community space, offering job training, counseling, and transitional housing for families of service members. Every brick laid, every wall raised felt like a piece of Grandpa's voice, his lessons, and his unshakable belief in integrity made tangible. At the groundbreaking ceremony, I gave a short speech. The cameras were there, of course, but I didn't care about them. I looked out at the veterans who had come, at the families standing in the crowd, and I said, "This isn't about me, and it isn't about the Carters. This is about one man's promise to honor service and sacrifice. My grandfather believed dignity can't be bought, it's earned. Today, we honor him not with words, but with action." The applause was quiet but genuine, and as I stepped down from the podium, a man in a faded army jacket shook my hand and whispered, "He'd be proud, son." I carried those words with me like armor. Meanwhile, my family drifted further into obscurity. Zach fought the bar's charges tooth and nail, but when the evidence of forged documents, shell corporations, and witness testimonies stacked against him, even his arrogance couldn't shield him. His license was permanently revoked, and the DA moved forward with criminal charges. I didn't attend the hearings, but I read the transcripts later. At one point, the prosecutor quoted Grandpa's video testimony, and Zach's silence in response said more than any verdict ever could. Haley, desperate to claw her way back into relevance, attempted to come back with a new channel called Starting Over, but it fizzled out quickly. Without the Carter name attached to luxury and without brands willing to sponsor her, her follower count dropped to almost nothing. She posted a tearful video about family betrayal, but this time, no one believed her. My parents stayed in our hometown, living quietly, avoiding public places where whispers followed them. I never heard another word from them, except a single letter that arrived one winter morning. It wasn't an apology, it was an explanation. My mother wrote that they had been afraid of being forgotten, afraid of losing everything Grandpa built if it didn't stay in their control. They thought I was too passive to fight, too detached to care. "We misjudged you," she wrote. I folded the letter once and placed it in a box with other documents, evidence, articles, court transcripts. I didn't hate them. I didn't forgive them either. I simply understood them for what they were. People who let fear and greed dictate their choices. And that understanding freed me more than anger ever could. Years passed, and the Carter scandal became just another headline archived in the past. People forgot the details, but they remembered the outcome. They remembered that truth had come out, that arrogance had been punished, and that integrity had endured. The Henry Carter Center opened its doors and quickly became more than a building. It became a symbol. Veterans called it the House of Honor, and families who walked through its halls felt dignity restored in ways money alone could never provide. Every time I walked those halls, I remembered Grandpa's voice telling me to trust my gut, to never sign anything without reading every damn line, to stand tall even when the world mocked me. His lessons had saved me. His legacy had shaped me. And now, through me, his values would outlive us both. One evening, years after the trial, I sat on the porch of Grandpa's house, the house that had nearly been stolen, now restored and preserved as part of the center. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky with fire, and I thought about the arc of it all. I thought about betrayal, humiliation, the weight of isolation. I thought about Zach sneer in that SUV, Haley's smirk on our live stream, my parents' false smiles at that dinner table. And then I thought about Peterson handing me the will, Amanda writing the truth, and the veterans shaking my hand with gratitude. I realized then that this story was never really about defeating them. It was about proving to myself that I could withstand everything they threw at me without losing who I was. Money fades, fame fades, but integrity? That lasts. As the crickets began their night chorus, I whispered softly into the air, "We did it, Grandpa." They tried to erase me, but all they erased was themselves. And what you left me wasn't just an estate, it was the strength to see this through. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace, not because I had won, but because I had turned the pain into something greater. That was the true inheritance. The end. If you stayed with me until the end of this story, I want to thank you for listening to everything I went through. Sharing this wasn't easy, but I believe stories like mine remind us that truth, respect, and integrity are always worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. If you found my journey meaningful, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button and subscribe. It helps me know you want more stories like this. I'm also curious what you thought about the plot. Were you surprised when my grandfather's video revealed the truth? Did you expect my family's downfall to happen the way it did? And one more thing, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts and your location. It means a lot to see how far these stories can reach.